5 years. That was how long it had been since I last heard her voice. 5 years since my wife packed 2 designer suitcases, looked me straight in the eyes, and calmly told me she deserved a man who could match her ambitions. Then she walked out of our home in Denver, Colorado, climbed into a black Bentley, and disappeared with the man she believed could give her the life I never could. No dramatic goodbye. No apology. No hesitation. Just silence. For a long time, I believed I had moved on. I buried myself in work, focused on rebuilding my career, and slowly created a life that no longer depended on anyone else's choices. Eventually, the heartbreak faded. The memories became quieter. And I finally found peace. Or at least, that's what I believed. Until one ordinary Monday morning changed everything. I was sitting in my executive office overlooking downtown Seattle, Washington, reviewing the final applications for a director of operations position. Normally, I never handled hiring personally. Human resources managed everything until the final interview. But this position reported directly to me, so the last decision was mine. I picked up the next application. Then completely froze. The photograph. The name. The signature. Every detail instantly pulled me back 5 years. Sophia Reynolds. My ex-wife. I blinked. Closed the folder. Then opened it again. Same face. Same handwriting. Same date of birth. There was no mistake. For nearly a full minute, I simply stared at the application. Not because I still loved her. That chapter of my life had ended years ago. But because life has an incredible way of bringing people back when you least expect it. Out of thousands of companies across America, she had unknowingly applied to mine. A gentle knock interrupted my thoughts. Mr. Brooks? I looked up. My executive assistant, Claire Morrison, stepped inside carrying her tablet. You've been staring at that file for almost 15 minutes. I smiled politely. Old memories. She studied my face. You okay? Yeah. She nodded before quietly leaving my office. The moment the door closed, I looked back down at the application. Then picked up my phone. Not to call Sophia. To call Human Resources. A few minutes later, our HR director, Jennifer Collins, walked into my office. You wanted to see me? I slid the application across my desk. I know this candidate. She glanced down at the name before looking back at me. Personally? I nodded once. Very personally. Understanding immediately crossed her face. Your ex-wife? Yes. Jennifer leaned back in her chair. Would you like me to remove her from the hiring process? 5 years earlier. My answer would have been immediate. Absolutely. I wouldn't have wanted her anywhere near my company. But time changes people. Success changes people even more. I looked down at the resume again. One thing immediately caught my attention. There was almost a 5-year employment gap. Another detail stood out. She had completely changed industries. Nothing about her career made sense anymore. Something had happened. Something significant. Finally, I looked back at Jennifer. Continue the process. She looked surprised. You want us to interview her? Yes. Are you sure? I nodded. Completely. She gathered the file. I'll schedule the first interview for next week. After she left, I sat alone in silence. Not thinking about our marriage. Not thinking about the divorce. I found myself asking a completely different question. What happened? What happened to the glamorous life she chose over ours? What happened to Ethan Walker? The billionaire entrepreneur she left me for. The man with private jets. Luxury penthouses. Magazine covers. And unlimited money. Back then, she truly believed he was her future. She believed she had upgraded her life. So why was she now applying for a management job at my company? The question stayed with me all week. Thursday finally arrived. At exactly 9 a.m., Claire stepped into my office. "She's here." For just a second. My heartbeat sped up. Not because I wanted her back. But because some memories never disappear completely. I stood and walked toward the executive observation room overlooking the main conference room. Through the large glass window, I saw her sitting alone at the interview table. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked older. 5 years changes everyone. It was something else. The expensive confidence she once carried everywhere had disappeared. The designer handbags were gone. The luxury jewelry was gone. Even the way she sat had changed. She looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. Like life had slowly worn away every illusion she once believed in. And for the very first time, I realized something. Life hadn't unfolded the way she expected. Not even close. The interview began exactly on schedule. I stayed behind the observation glass while Jennifer Collins and 2 senior managers welcomed Sophia into the conference room. She smiled politely. Thanked everyone for their time. Then the questions began. At first, everything felt completely ordinary. They discussed her previous management experience. Leadership. Problem solving. Conflict resolution. Team development. Sophia answered every question professionally. She was calm. Prepared. Confident enough to impress the panel. But something about her confidence felt different. Years ago, she had spoken with the certainty of someone who believed life would always work in her favor. Now, every answer sounded earned. Like experience had replaced arrogance. Nearly 30 minutes into the interview, Jennifer turned another page in the resume. "I'd like to ask about the employment gap." The room became noticeably quieter. Sophia lowered her eyes. For several seconds, she didn't answer. Finally she spoke. "I was taking care of someone." Jennifer nodded gently. "A family member?" Another long silence followed. Then Sophia quietly replied. "My husband." From behind the glass. I frowned. "Husband? Ethan?" Jennifer continued carefully. "Is he doing better now?" Sophia's eyes filled with sadness. She slowly shook her head. "No." Nobody spoke. Then she whispered words I never expected to hear. "He passed away almost 3 years ago." Everything inside me stopped. For several seconds, I couldn't process what I just heard. The billionaire. The man with private jets. Luxury resorts. Magazine interviews. The man Sophia believed was her dream life. Gone. Jennifer offered her condolences. Sophia thanked her with a weak smile before continuing the interview. But my attention had completely disappeared. I wasn't listening anymore. Questions echoed in the background while my mind tried putting together pieces that no longer fit. What happened? How could someone with unlimited wealth end up, gone? The interview finished 20 minutes later. Sophia thanked everyone again before leaving the room. I remained standing behind the glass long after she disappeared. Claire quietly entered beside me. "So?" I kept looking toward the empty conference room. "Did she know?" Claire looked confused. "Know what?" "That this is my company." She opened the candidate file on her tablet. After checking several notes, she looked back at me. "No. There's nothing indicating she recognized the company ownership." I slowly nodded. "Interesting. Very interesting. Because that changed everything. She hadn't applied here because of me. She wasn't trying to reconnect. She wasn't asking for another chance. She genuinely had no idea whose company she had entered. Somehow, that made the situation even stranger. An hour later, Jennifer walked into my office carrying the interview report. Overall, she performed extremely well. She handed me the evaluation. Excellent communication. Strong leadership. High recommendation from every interviewer. I flipped through the pages until something caught my attention. No references connected to Ethan Walker. No companies linked to his businesses. No executive positions. Nothing. It was almost as if those 5 years of her life had been erased completely. I looked up. Did she explain that? Jennifer shook her head. No. She kept the conversation entirely professional. After she left, I sat quietly reviewing the file again. The resume told one story. Reality clearly told another. People don't walk away from billionaire lifestyles and quietly apply for middle management positions without a reason. Something had happened. Something much bigger than anyone inside that conference room realized. The following morning, I made my decision. Move her to the final interview. Claire looked surprised. You'll be conducting that interview yourself. I know. She hesitated. Are you sure that's a good idea? I smiled. I'm not interviewing my ex-wife. She raised an eyebrow. I'm interviewing a candidate. The final interview was scheduled for the following Friday. 10 o'clock. Executive conference room. Exactly 1 week later. I walked into the boardroom 5 minutes early. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Seattle skyline. A long walnut conference table stretched across the room. Everything about the space reflected years of hard work. Years she had never witnessed. Years she had never believed were possible for me. At exactly 10 a.m. the conference room door slowly opened. Sophia stepped inside. She took one look at me. And completely froze. The color drained from her face. For several long seconds. Neither of us said a single word. She looked around the room. Then back at me. Trying to understand what she was seeing. Trying to understand how the man she once was. The interview lasted nearly 45 minutes. Surprisingly. It felt almost normal. Sophia answered every question with professionalism. She spoke about leadership. Operational efficiency. Managing difficult teams. Building company culture. Risk management. Everything an executive would expect from a qualified candidate. Not once. Not a single time. Did she mention our marriage? Or the divorce? Or the man she had left me for? When the interview officially ended, the other executives gathered their notes and quietly walked out of the conference room. Within seconds. Only the two of us remained. The silence felt heavier than the interview itself. Finally, Sophia spoke. I honestly didn't know this was your company. I nodded. I believe you. She looked relieved. Then she slowly looked around the executive boardroom. The skyline. The awards. The company logo mounted on the wall. Everything she was seeing had once been impossible to imagine. How long have you been CEO? Almost 4 years. She lowered her eyes. Then quietly laughed to herself. Not because anything was funny. Because reality had become almost unbelievable. You've done incredibly well. Thank you. Another silence followed. She stood, picked up her portfolio, then stopped just before reaching the door. Without turning around, she asked. Are you going to hire me? I looked at her for several seconds. I honestly don't know yet. She simply nodded. Then walked away. As the door quietly closed, I realized this story wasn't ending. It was only beginning. 3 days later. I was having lunch with one of our senior board advisors, Michael Foster. During a casual conversation, he unexpectedly mentioned Ethan Walker's name. I looked up. "You knew Ethan?" Michael laughed. "The whole investment world knew Ethan." I set my coffee down. "What actually happened to him?" Michael's expression immediately changed. "You seriously don't know?" I slowly shook my head. He leaned back in his chair. "It was one of the biggest financial collapses we've seen in years." Then he told me everything. Federal investigators had opened multiple fraud investigations. Several investors filed lawsuits worth hundreds of millions. Banks froze company accounts. Business partners disappeared overnight. Luxury properties were auctioned. Private jets were repossessed. His companies collapsed one after another. Within less than 3 years. Everything was gone. Every dollar. Every headline. Every ounce of influence. I listened without interrupting. Then Michael quietly added. "Most people think the stress destroyed his health." I remained silent. For years, I had imagined Ethan living the perfect life. Instead, he had been watching his entire empire fall apart. That evening, I drove home through downtown Seattle without turning on the radio. The city lights reflected across the windshield while one thought refused to leave my mind. Sophia hadn't left me because she hated me. She left because she believed money guaranteed happiness. When the money disappeared, so did the fantasy. The following morning another report landed on my desk. Final hiring recommendation. Sophia Reynolds. Approved by every department. Only one signature remained. Mine. I stared at the document for several minutes. 5 years earlier, I would have rejected it immediately. Not because she lacked qualifications. Because I would have wanted revenge. Back then, pain controlled my decisions. Now, it didn't. Success has a strange effect on people. The more your life improves, the less interested you become in proving anything to your past. I picked up my pen. Then stopped. Instead of signing, I asked Claire to arrange one final private meeting. No interview. No executives. Just the two of us. She looked surprised. "You want to speak with her alone?" "Yes." The meeting was scheduled for Monday morning. 9 o'clock. My office. When Monday finally arrived, Sophia knocked softly before stepping inside. She looked nervous. Far more nervous than she had during any interview. I invited her to sit down. For nearly a full minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. "I owe you an explanation." I folded my hands across the desk. "I'm listening." She took a deep breath. "For years, I blamed everyone except myself. My parents. My friends. You." She looked down. "But eventually, I ran out of people to blame." That sentence hit harder than anything else she had said. Because it sounded genuine. Not rehearsed. Not manipulative. Just honest. She continued quietly. "I truly believed money solved everything. I thought wealth automatically created happiness." She looked around my office. The executive floor. The skyline. The company we both knew I had built from nothing. Then she smiled sadly. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was honest. Sophia finally reached into her purse and pulled out a sealed envelope. She carefully placed it on my desk. "What's this?" She looked at me with tired eyes. Everything I should have said 5 years ago. I glanced at the envelope. "You don't have to read it now." Then she stood. I've taken enough of your time. She started toward the door before stopping one last time. Without turning around, she quietly said, "I hope life gives you everything I once failed to appreciate." Then she walked away. The door closed softly behind her. For a long moment, I simply stared at the envelope. Eventually, I opened it. Inside were several handwritten pages. No excuses. No manipulation. No attempt to blame anyone else. She admitted she had confused wealth with happiness. She admitted she had mistaken confidence for character. She admitted that leaving me had been the biggest mistake of her life. The final sentence caught my attention. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve another chance. I simply wanted you to know that I finally understand the man I lost." I quietly folded the letter and placed it back inside the envelope. Then I looked out across the Seattle skyline. 5 years ago, those words would have meant everything to me. Today, they simply gave me peace. The following morning, Jennifer Collins walked into my office. "We need your final decision." She placed Sophia's hiring file in front of me. Every evaluation was outstanding. Every executive recommended hiring her. The decision belonged entirely to me. I picked up my pen, signed the approval form, then slid it back across the desk. Jennifer smiled. "I'll let her know." I nodded. "One condition." She looked curious. "No special treatment. No favoritism. She earns everything exactly like everyone else." Jennifer smiled again. I expected nothing less. Months passed. Our company continued expanding across North America. New offices opened. New partnerships were signed. Revenue reached record levels. Life kept moving forward. One afternoon, Human Resources sent me a quarterly leadership report. Sophia's name appeared near the top. Outstanding performance. Exceptional leadership. Promotion recommended. I smiled. Not because she had once been my wife, but because she had rebuilt her life honestly. Without shortcuts. Without someone else's money. Without pretending to be someone she wasn't. She had finally become successful on her own. Almost a year later, our company hosted its annual leadership gala. Hundreds of executives, investors, and business partners filled the ballroom. As CEO, I spent most of the evening greeting guests. Near the end of the event, I noticed Sophia standing across the room. She had changed again. Not because of expensive clothes. Not because of jewelry. But because her confidence had returned. This time, it wasn't built on someone else's success. It came from her own hard work. She walked over with a warm smile. "I wanted to thank you. You never gave me special treatment. You simply gave me a fair opportunity." I smiled. "That's all anyone deserves." She nodded. "I know." After a brief conversation, she returned to her colleagues. There were no emotional speeches. No romantic reunion. No dramatic ending. Just two people whose lives had taken very different paths. Exactly as they were meant to. As the evening came to an end, I stood alone near the ballroom windows overlooking the city lights. 5 years earlier, I thought losing my marriage had destroyed my future. I couldn't have been more wrong. The heartbreak forced me to grow. The rejection forced me to improve. The loneliness forced me to discover who I really was. People often believe revenge is the greatest victory. They're mistaken. Real victory is reaching a point where revenge no longer matters. Because success isn't making someone regret leaving you. Success is building a life so meaningful that you stop needing anyone's approval. I never got my marriage back. I never wanted it back. She rebuilt her future. I built mine. And somehow, that was the happiest ending either of us could have hoped for. Looking back now, I don't remember the day she walked away. I remember the day I finally stopped looking backward. Because that was the day my real life truly began. And that was worth far more than revenge ever could have been.